going to try my best to listen to this Israel debate. This will be it's on the Lex Friedman podcast. It's very long. I don't know how much we're gonna get through. I'm gonna skip to a certain part in it just to get past the history. Also, I really don't like Destiny. He's like him and Ethan Klein from H3H3 are probably like my two least favorite content creators. But you know, in the pursuit of artistic endeavors, sometimes we must suffer. I'm gonna turn down the helldivers audio. I got a message the servers were at capacity when I logged in, and that shit hasn't happened since fucking like the first 2 weeks. I don't know what the hell is going on. I don't think they added anything new, because they haven't added anything new except the war bond and the mechs. I've been stuck at 50,000 requisitions, and I don't even play that much. I play like 2 hours a day tops. When I can, so I need something to buy, or it's gonna suck if we get a bunch of new stratagems that come out all at once, and I can only buy like one or two, when without the cap, I would have probably like 500,000 requisitions by now. So it's like a waste right now to even stop and pick up requisition slips. I do want to be able to hear the game, but I also want to be able to hear the podcast, so we'll try to find a balance. In the meantime, you know, I'll be changing up loadouts and armor to keep it interesting. I have been seeing people dominate with the arc thrower, and I probably should keep using it just till I get better at it. But, you know, I'll mix it up. Try to keep the gameplay interesting while the podcast goes on. I would love to have a pop-in screen, like right here. But you accidentally click on it too much, and in Helldivers, it's not Power World, bro. That'll get you fucking killed. So we'll just have to listen to audio.
No, it's a good point.
Now, some people accuse me of speaking very slowly, and they're advised on YouTube to turn up the speed 2 to 3 times whenever I'm on. One of the reasons I
Alright, let's skip to the October 7th. It's 2 hours in.
Let's move to the modern day, and we'll return to history, maybe 67 and other important moments, but let's look to today.
Actually,
months. October 7th.
Just checking to see if anything new happened.
Pointed question. Was October 7th attacks by Hamas on Israel genocidal? Was it an act of ethnic cleansing? Just so we lay out the moral calculus that we are engaged in.
I'd say no. I'd say it's retaliation.
The problem with October 7th is this.
Aren't all attacks genocidal by nature if they're motivated by racial tensions?
Who invaded southern Israel.
This is a bad loadout.
Ordered to murder, rape, and do all the nasty things that they did, and they killed some 1,200 Israelis that day, and abducted, as we know, something like 250 civilians, mostly civilians, also some soldiers, took them back to Gaza, dungeons in Gaza. But they were motivated not just by the words of their current leader in the Gaza Strip, but by their ideology, which is embedded in their charter from 1988, if I remember correctly. And that charter is genocidal. It says that the Jews must be eradicated, basically, from the land of Israel, from Palestine. The Jews are described there as sons of apes and pigs. The Jews are a base people, killers of prophets, and they should not exist in Palestine. It doesn't say that they necessarily should be murdered all around the world, the Hamas charter, but certainly the Jews should be eliminated.
I don't want to play with people right now. Alright, be on Discord.
Ideology
very sleepy.
Behind the massacre of the Jews on October 7th, which brought down on the Gaza Strip, and I think with the intention by the Hamas of the Israeli counteroffensive, because they knew that that counteroffensive would result in many Palestinian dead, because the Hamas fighters and their weaponry and so on.
I'm gonna try eradicate by myself. These are tough, man.
And they hoped to benefit from this in the eyes of world public opinion, as Israel chased these Hamas people and their ammunition dumps and so on, and killed lots of Palestinian civilians in the process. All of this was understood by Sinwar, by the head of the Hamas, and he strived for that. But initially, he wanted to kill as many Jews as he could in the border areas around the Gaza.
Equipment.
I'll respond directly to the points you made, and then I'll leave it to Norm to bring in the historical context. That Hamas charter is from the 90s, I think?
1988.
1988, so it's from the 80s. I think your characterization of that charter as anti-Semitic is indisputable. I think your characterization of that charter as genocidal is off the mark.
It's implicit.
And more importantly, that charter has been superseded by a new charter. It, in fact, has been, well, there is
no new charter.
There is
a explanation, a statement they made
2018,
in
a political
2017,
I'll try it.
2018, supposedly clarifying things which are in the charter, but it doesn't actually step back from what the charter says. Eliminate Israel, eliminate the Jews from the land of Israel.
In 2018, the Hamas charter, if we look at the current version of the charter,
it's not called a
Whether-
charter.
whether
You're
you-
calling it a charter. It wasn't.
It
The only thing called the charter is what was issued in 1988 by Yassin himself.
anyway, it makes a clear distinction between Jews and Zionists in 2018. Now, you can choose to dismiss it, believe it.
Hopefully I
it's
get a
sincere,
couple
it's
seconds to call
insincere,
shit in.
Whatever.
Insincere is probably the right thing.
Secondly, I'm really unfamiliar with fighters who consult these kinds of documents
No, they're brought
before
up
they
this
go
in their
on.
education system. In the kindergarten, they're told, kill the Jews. They practice with make-believe guns and uniforms when they're 5 years old in the kindergartens of the Hamas.
At the
in
instruction
Gaza,
of the
in
Commissioner
Gaza.
General of UNRWA, right?
I didn't say that. I said the Hamas has kindergartens and summer camps in which they train to kill Jews, children aged 5 and 6.
Secondly, you keep saying Jews, to which I would respond.
They use the word Jews.
To which I would respond that Hamas
let's
does
do
not have a
down, up,
record
down, up,
of
go.
deliberately targeting
Let's
Jews who
do...
are not Israelis.
Oh, I picked auto
And
cannon.
in fact, it also doesn't have a record
That was a
of
mistake.
deliberately targeting either Jews or Israelis outside Israel and Palestine. So, you know, all this
Let's
talk
do left, down,
of,
right, up, left, down,
Unlike
down.
the Hezbollah, which has targeted,
Well, we're talking about
Jews outside, outside Palestine.
We're talking about October 7th and Hamas. If you'd also like to speak about Hezbollah, let's get to that separately, if you don't mind. So again, genocidal. Well, if that
cool. I'm
term
gonna
is
go
going to be
marching so I don't get
discussed,
hit by my own
the
auto
first
cannon.
response would be, let's talk about potentially genocidal actions against Israelis rather than against Jews for the reasons that I just mentioned. And again, I find this constant conflation of Jews, Israel, Zionism to be a bit disturbing. Secondly, I think there are quite a few indications in the factual record that raise serious questions about the accusations of the genocidal intent and genocidal practice of what happened on October 7th. And my final point would be, I don't think I should take your word for it. I don't think you should take my word for it. I think what we need here is a proper, independent, international investigation. And the reason we need that of genocide during this conflict, whether by Palestinians on October 7th or Israel thereafter. The reason that we need such an investigation is because there won't be any hearings on what Hamas did on October 7th at the International Court of Justice because the International Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide deals only with states and not with movements. I think the International Criminal Court, and specifically its current prosecutor, Karim Khan, lacks any and all credibility. He's been an absolute failure at his job. He's just been sitting on his backside for years on this file. And I think I would point out that Hamas has called for independent investigations of all these allegations. Israel has categorically
Looks like the
rejected
Gatling's
any
out of ammo.
international investigation, of course, fully supported by the United States. And I think what is required is to have credible investigations of these things, because I don't think you're going to convince me. I don't think I'm going to convince you. And this is two people sitting across the table from each
No,
other.
but there's certain things you don't even have to investigate. You know how many citizens, civilians died in the
Yes.
October 7th
Yes,
assault.
but that's not.
You know that there are lots of allegations of rape. I don't know how persuaded you are of those. They did find bodies without heads. Which is,
There were no beheadings
Islamic.
of infants.
There were some beheadings apparently.
The Israelis didn't even claim that in the document they submitted before the ICJ. Go read what your government submitted. It never mentioned beheadings.
Well, as far as I know,
I
there were some
read it.
people who were beheaded, but
We could bring it up right
you
now.
also deny that there were rapes there.
I didn't deny. I said I've not seen convincing evidence that confirms it. I've said that from day one, and I'll say it today, 4.5 months later.
Do you know that they killed 800 or 900 civilians in their assault?
Absolutely, that seems to me indisputable.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm
Yes,
glad
and
that you're
I've
conceding
said that.
something.
I've said that from day one.
Well, to be clear, you haven't. You did a debate. I don't remember the talk show, but you seemed to imply that there was a lot of crossfire, and then it might have been the IDF that
I
had killed a lot of.
said that there is no
Thank God he's
question
not
because
speaking-
The
oh.
names were published in Haaretz.
Was it the
There's no
autocannon that got me?
question that roughly of the 1,200 people killed, 800 of them were civilians.
Oh, I'm gonna get killed
850.
immediately.
So I never said that, but then I said, no, we don't know exactly how they were killed. But 800 civilians killed, no, 850, no question there. And I also said on repeated occasions, there cannot be any doubt, in my opinion, as of now, with the available evidence, that Hamas was responsible for significant atrocities. And I made sure to include
Oh.
the plural.
There's a lot of tricky language being employed here. Do you think of the
There's nothing
850?
tricky. It's called attaching value to words. And
What's
not
our kill
talking
count at?
like a
110
motor mouth.
and me
I am
twice.
very careful about qualifying because that's
Okay,
what
then let me just
language
ask
is about.
That's great. Then let me just ask a clarifying question. Do you firmly believe that the majority of the 850 civilians were killed by Hamas?
My view is even if it were half, 400 is a huge number by any reckoning. It's
Okay, wait, you didn't.
I said
wait,
even
hold on.
if
Wait.
because
hold on,
because
wait, wait,
Benny
my question.
because Professor Morris, I don't know. I agree with Mouin Rabbani. I'm not sure if he concedes the 400. I'll say because I have because right as I said.
850
Well,
slaughtered
because-
by Hamas.
If I may-
Maybe
I don't know.
a couple of individuals were killed in the Israeli action.
I don't know.
You're saying from
Professor
day one
Morris,
you believe this
Professor-
particular thing, and you
Professor
clearly
Morris,
don't. You clearly
I
don't
said
believe this
from
thing. You don't.
day one,
You said
no.
people died. That's not
No.
controversial.
Wait,
Okay.
hold on. If I may.
That's not controversial.
Mr. Brunel, I attach value to words.
Yes, you said that.
When
You value them,
when
stop
I
repeating them
was,
so
yes,
much.
Mr. Brunel, please slow down the speech and attempt to listen. When I was explicitly asked by Pierce Morgan, I said there can be no question that Hamas committed atrocities
I've heard this,
on
yes.
October 7th. If you want me to pin down a number, I can't do that.
I didn't ask you to
but
pin
I
down
may-
a number. You can listen to
You
what I'm
didn't
saying.
ask me?
No, my question is.
Okay.
I'll ask a
Mr.
very
Brunel,
precise
I cannot
question.
listen to you because
Excuse
you're
me.
not.
It's
If
a
I
very,
under-
it's a very easy
If I
question.
understood your question correctly.
My question is, do you think the majority of the people that were killed on
Yes.
October 7th, the civilians, were killed by Hamas,
Yes.
or are we subscribing to the idea that the IDF killed hundreds,
No,
400 or 500?
No,
in
but
crossfire?
let me explain why that's a difficult question to answer. The total number of civilians killed was 800, 850. We know that Hamas is responsible, probably for the majority of this. We also know that there were killings by
Ah, get the
Islamic
fuck off me.
Jihad. We also know.
We're bunching together the Islamic Jihad and the Hamas. That's
Well,
splitting
his question
hairs now.
was specific.
No, but he means
No, it's
the raiders.
I,
He means the
I'm
raiders.
speaking in opposition to the conspiracy theory that people like you prefer Norm or Professor Finkelstein, or what do you? I don't know how do you prefer?
Well,
to be
it's not a
addressed?
conspiracy theory.
Well,
because
the
it's a-
conspiracy theory is the idea that the IDF killed the majority of them.
It's not a conspiracy theory.
And then there's also
majority-
a theory that, as Norm pointed out on the show that he was on, that he thought that it was very strange that, given how reputable Israeli services are when it comes to sending ambulances,
kill the rest.
bodies, he thought it was very strange that that number was
Myself.
continually being adjusted.
And do you know
so
why-
when you say that in combination with, well,
The
I'm not
Jews and
sure
adjusting
how many
numbers.
people
You know why the
IDF
number?
Never heard
you
of
know
that
why the number
before.
went down? The number went down because the Israeli authorities were in possession of 200 corpses that were burned to a crisp, that they assumed were Israelis who had been killed on October 7th. They later determined that these were in fact Palestinian fighters. Now, how does a Palestinian fighter get burned to a crisp?
No, you're mixing two things.
I don't
Some
think
of the bodies they weren't able to identify, and eventually they ruled that some of them were actually Arab marauders rather than Israeli victims. A few of them also, of the Jews, were burnt to a crisp. And it took them time to work this out. And they came out initially with a slightly higher figure, 1,400 dead, and eventually reduced it to 1,200
And the
dead
reason
Israelis.
the reason is that a proportion of Israeli civilians killed on October 7th. I don't believe it was a majority. We don't know how many. Some were killed in crossfire. Some were killed by Israeli shell fire, helicopter fire, and so on. And the
Jesus
majority
Christ, that
were
was
killed
close.
by Palestinians. And of that majority, we don't know. I mean, again, I understood your question is referring specifically to Hamas, which is why I tried to answer it that way. But if you meant generically Palestinians, yes. If you
I
mean
can't move at
specifically
all right
Hamas,
now.
We don't have a clear breakdown of how
No,
many
I don't mean
were-
specifically Hamas,
Okay.
but I just think when you use the word some, that's doing a lot of heavy lifting. That's fine, but some can mean anywhere from 1% to 49%.
But we don't know.
So the numbers here and the details are interesting and important almost from a legal perspective, but if we zoom out, the moral perspective, are Palestinians from Gaza justified in violent resistance?
Well, Palestinians have the right to resistance. That right includes the right to armed resistance. At the same time, armed resistance is subject to the laws of war. And there are very clear regulations that separate legitimate acts of armed resistance.
Great,
from
all my,
acts of armed
what do you call it, are about to go
resistance,
away.
that are
As
not
soon as that thing
legitimate.
The
lands.
attacks of October 7th, where did they land for you?
There's been almost exclusive focus on the attacks on civilian
It's so nice you don't have to call it
population and the killings of civilians on October 7th.
Alright, don't burn me. Don't burn me.
What is much less discussed, to the point of amnesia, is that there were very extensive attacks on Israeli military and intelligence facilities on October 7th. I would make a very clear distinction between those two. And secondly, I'm not sure that I would characterize the efforts by Palestinians on October 7th.
So
to
one of these
seize
guys is a
Israeli
Jewish
territory and Israeli
Hamas
population
apologist. That's really
centers
interesting.
as in and of themselves illegitimate.
You mean attacking Israeli civilians?
No,
legitimate?
no, that's not what I
didn't
said.
understand what you said.
I think what you had on October 7th was an effort by Hamas to seize Israeli territory and population
And
centers.
kill civilians.
That's not what I said. What I said is I think I'm
It
I
was
would
a
not
fucking
describe the effort to seize
reaction to
Israeli
apartheid.
territory as in and of itself illegitimate.
They shouldn't be in that land
That's a
together,
separate
man.
issue from the killing of Israeli
It's an
civilians,
untenable
where,
situation.
in those cases where they had been deliberately targeted, that's very clearly
Whole
illegitimate.
families were slaughtered in kibbutzim.
But I'm making.
I think-
Ma-
Wait,
many
wait,
of
wait,
them,
quick,
many
I
of
think
them
wait.
left-wingers,
I think-
incidentally, who helped Palestinians go to hospitals in Israel and so on.
Again-
Even drove Palestinian cancer patients to hospitals in Israeli.
Again, I'm making a
But you
distinction
don't seem
here.
to be very condemnatory of what the Hamas did.
Well, I don't do selective condemnation.
I'm not talking about selective.
I don't
I'm
do
talking about
selective
specific
outrage.
condemnation of this specific
Well, you know what
assault
it- you
on
know what it
civilians.
is. You know,
I would, for example.
Oh, this is the 15-minute
condemn
mission.
Israeli assault
Shit.
on civilians deliberate assaults on civilians.
Yes,
I would
and-
condemn them, but you're not doing that.
Mortars
You're the
again.
Hamas.
You know what?
Maybe I'll pick the right one
Um,
this time.
I've been speaking in public.
Mortar,
now. I was
mortar,
here since the late
Gatling.
1980s and interviewed and so
I'm gonna
on.
skip the exosuit
I've never
this
on
time.
one occasion ever been asked to
gonna
condemn
go shield.
any Israeli act. When I've been in group discussions, those supporting the Israeli action or perspective, I have never encountered an example where these individuals are asked
Let's
to
try the
condemn
Blitzer.
what Israel is doing. The demand and obligation of condemnation is exclusively applied, in my personal experience over decades, is exclusively applied to Palestinians
No, this is
and
not.
those.
Israel is condemned day and night on every television channel, on every, and has been for the
I'm
last
telling
decade.
you about a personal experience.
I mean, every
last
television
week.
channel they don't control,
Uh-oh. Oh, no.
which is a select few.
I shouldn't have said anything at any point.
You should say,
Uh-oh.
Professor Morris.
Yes.
You just said, I would condemn
And I have
anytime
condemned.
Israel deliberately attacks civilians.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I need to find a place to put a Gatling gun where it'll actually be effective.
Over and over again, you claim, in the face of
Let's try to get it up
overwhelming
there.
evidence,
Did I miss my
that
throw?
they didn't attack civilians.
Throw it clean over.
I've said
Really?
Israel has attacked
Professor-
civilians.
Professor
in
Morris.
Kibya, Israel attacked
Right,
civilians.
right, Professor
and I've
Morris.
written extensively.
Where did I
about
throw
I
it?
know that.
In Kafr Qasim, they killed
Yes.
civilians. And I've written
And now
that.
let's.
So you're just
Okay,
eliminating,
okay.
you're selecting,
Okay.
as Stephen
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
you cherry pick.
If I were you,
Before you cherry pick.
Let's fast forward when you were an adult. What did you say about the 1982 Lebanon War?
What did I say?
You don't remember? Okay. Allow me.
Uh-oh.
Okay. So, it happens that I was not at all I had no interest in the Israel-Palestine conflict as a young man until the 1982 Lebanon War.
Yeah. Lost the passage.
I'll find it.
Okay, real quick, while he's searching for that,
Yeah, allow me.
you
That's
bring up
good.
something that's really important that a lot of people don't draw a distinction between, in that there is just causes for war and there is just ways to act within a war, and these two things principally do have a distinction from one another.
Correct.
However, while I appreciate the recognition of the distinction, the idea that
Ooh,
the
these two are
cause
close
for
together.
war that Hamas was engaged in, I don't believe, if we look at their actions in war or the statements that they've made, it doesn't seem like it had to do with territorial acquisition.
No. The
Like
point,
taking land
No,
back.
the point I was making was what was Hamas trying to achieve militarily on October 7th? And I was pointing out that the focus has been very much on Hamas attacks on civilians and atrocities and so on. And I'm not saying those things should be ignored. What
All right,
I'm
let's
saying
get
is
it.
that what's getting lost in the shuffle is that there were
The fuck?
extensive
They're getting
attacks
stuck at the fucking
on
door.
military and intelligence facilities. And as far as let's say, the other aspects are concerned,
Why are
because
they
I think
bombing the door?
Either you or Lex asked me about.
Was there like
the
a single
legitimacy
bug
of
over
these
here or
attacks. I said,
something?
I'm unclear
Jesus Christ,
whether
guys.
efforts by Hamas to seize
Read
Israeli
the room.
population centers in and of themselves are illegitimate, as opposed to actions that either deliberately targeted Israeli civilians or actions that should reasonably have been expected to result in the killings of Israeli civilians. Those strike me as by definition illegitimate. And I want to be very clear about that.
Illegitimate means you condemn them.
Illegitimate means they are not legitimate. I have a problem
Condemning
with-
your side, yes.
No, not condemning my side. I have a problem with selective outrage, and I have a problem with selective condemnation. And as I explained to you a few minutes ago, in my
Everything's about to come off
decades
cooldown,
of
so we won't have
appearing
to
in
live without
public and being
anything.
interviewed, I have never seen. I've never been asked to condemn an Israeli action. I've never been asked for a moral judgment on an Israeli action. Exclusive request for condemnation has to do with what Palestinians do, and just as importantly, I'm sure if you watch BBC or CNN, when is the last time an Israeli spokesperson has been asked to condemn an Israeli act? I've never seen it.
I don't think we condemn the Arab side either, though, right? I don't think there was any condemnation. There
No,
wasn't
but
much.
now that we're talking about Israeli victims, all of a sudden morality is
Well, I
central.
think the reason why it comes up is because there's no shortage of international condemnation for Israel. As Norm will point out a million times, that there are 50 billion UN resolutions, you've got Amnesty International, you've got multiple bodies of the UN, you've got now this case for the ICJ, so there's no question of if there's condemnation for
But
Israel.
sorry, if I
Was
can
there
interrupt
any
you, in
question about-
1948, the entire world stood behind the establishment.
I'll
of
wait
a
for my guard,
genocide.
dog.
The
We got
entire
10
world-
minutes.
Except the Arab states and the Muslim
to get
states.
4.
Well,
Not the entire
Team
world.
okay, but I think you know what I mean by that.
The Western democracies, that's what you're saying.
Well, and then also just my
Western
quick question-
democracies supported the establishment of Israel.
My
That's
quick
what
question
you're
was:
saying.
you said that you believe that this is a very short one. You don't have to. It's just you think that there's an argument to be made that the people in Gaza, that Hamas and Islamic Jihad, whoever participated, had a just cause for war. Maybe they didn't do it in the correct way, but they
Or
maybe
picked
had
the
a just
wrong
cause for
guard,
war.
dog.
I
Do
don't
you-
think there's a maybe there.
Okay, you think they
Palestinians-
absolutely had a just cause for it.
Yeah.
Do you think that Israel has a just cause for Operation Swords of Iron?
No, of course not.
Okay. All right.
Oopsie.
You can say your thoughts.
Okay. First of all, on this issue of double standards, which is the one that irks.
How many rounds did you fire before you came to my backpack?
You said
You fucking
that you are not
shitter.
a person of double standards, unlike people like Nguyen. You hold high a single standard, and you condemn deliberate Israeli attacks on
Civilians.
When they occurred,
civilians.
yeah.
And I would say that's true for the period up till 1967, and I think it's accurate, your account of the First Intifada. There, it seems to me you were in conformity with most mainstream accounts. And the case of the First Intifada, you also used
Yeah, this guard dog
surprisingly, you
sucks
used
ass, bro.
human rights sources like Al-Haq, which I think Nguyen worked for during the First Intifada. That's true. But then something very strange happens. So let's illustrate it.
Wait, there's something strange which happened is the Arabs rejected the
Okay, wait.
peace offers.
Let,
That's what happened.
well,
By accepting the Oslo Agreement.
yeah.
Not the,
By
rejecting- he's talking about Camp
David
Okay,
and
they
Taffa.
Camp David.
If we have time, I know the record very well. I'd be very happy to go through it with you. But let's get to those double standards. So, this is what you have to say about Israel's invasion of Lebanon in 1982. You said Israel was reluctant to harm civilians, sought to avoid casualties on both sides, and took care not to harm Lebanese and Palestinian civilians.
What are the fucking
He
turrets
then went
out?
on to acknowledge the massive use of IDF firepower against civilians during the siege of Beirut, which traumatized Israeli society. Mars quickly enters the caveat that Israel, quote, tried to pinpoint
You guys are
military
screwed, I'm
targets,
sorry.
but
You
inevitably
guys are
many
screwed.
civilians
You
were
guys, will you fucking shoot?
That's your description of the Lebanon war. As I say, that's when I first got involved in the conflict. I am a voracious reader. I read everything.
Alright,
on
where's
the
my
Lebanon
extract?
War. I would say there's not a single account of the Lebanon war in which the estimates are between 15 and 20,000 Palestinian and Lebanese were killed, overwhelmingly civilians. The biggest bloodletting until the current Gaza genocide. Biggest bloodletting.
Might as well take it. I don't even
I
have a
would say
third.
I can't think of a single mainstream account that remotely approximates what you just said. So, leaving aside, I can name the books, voluminous, huge volumes. I'll just take one example. Now, you will remember, because I think you served in Lebanon in '82, am I correct on that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you will remember that Dov Yarmia kept a war diary. So, with your permission, allow me to describe what he wrote during his diary. So, he writes,
Neither one landed where I threw it.
Of the IDF is galloping and trampling over the
Down, left, up, right, up, down, right.
demonstrating a total insensitivity to the fate of the Arabs who are found in its path. A PLO-run hospital suffered a direct hit. Thousands of refugees are returning to the city. When they arrive at their homes, many of which have been destroyed or damaged, you hear their cries of pain and their howls over the deaths of their loved ones. The air is permeated with the smell
Oh, I
of
think we-
corpses. Destruction and
Yeah,
death
no,
are
the
continuing.
point
Does that-
made.
does that-
What
yeah, yeah.
point you're making
Does that
actually.
sound like
what
your
the point
description
you're-
of the Lebanon War?
Forget my description.
Forget it.
The point you're
Words
making.
are in
what-
print. We can't
no,
just
let me
forget them.
just finish my sentence. The point you're making, which you somehow forget, is that there are Israelis who strongly criticize their own side and describe how Israelis are doing things which they regard as immoral. You don't find that on the Arab side.
I'm talking about
Don't
you,
find that.
Mr. Morris. I'm not talking about Dev
Don't
Garmy.
hear me out. It's the
I'm
left
talking
wing.
about you, the historian. How did you depict the Lebanon
Because
War?
I believe
Yeah.
that the Israeli military tried to avoid committing a civilian
So
casualty.
Dev,
As I think they
as well?
Dev
As I think they
all the
in
all
Gaza
the accounts
now.
by Robert Fisk and Pity the
Robert
Nation.
Fisk is
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I see him.
All the- I know.
Anti-Zionist
I know.
journalist.
I know.
Has always been.
Right. So that's why you can say with such confidence that you don't condemn deliberate Israeli attacks on civilians.
I do.
Because there weren't any.
No, I didn't say
Oh,
that.
yeah, you
And
didn't?
you agreed that I have condemned Israeli attacks
Yes, there are
on civilians.
I never quarrel with facts. Your description of the 1982 war is so shocking, it makes my innards writhe. And then your description of the Second Intifada, your description of defensive shield,
When the
they are
Arabs were bombing,
worse.
when
They
Arab
were
suicide
worse than
bombers,
apologetics.
when Arab suicide
That's like the
bombers were
stoutest
destroying
form of falsification.
Jews in masses
No,
in
no.
buses and in restaurants.
No,
That's
you-
the Second Intifada. You remember that?
You can try
Suicide bombers in Jerusalem's buses and restaurants.
I am
and in
completely
Tel Aviv.
aware of that.
Well.
But if you forgot the numbers, it was 3-1. The number
They killed
yeah,
mostly armed
no,
Palestinian
I know
gunmen.
that's what you say
That's
in
what
your
I
book,
say. That's what
but
I
that's
say.
not what Amnesty International said. That's not what Human Rights Watch
I don't
said.
remember what
that's
they
not,
said.
I do.
No,
That's not what
I don't know
that's not
whether
It's
they-
crazy to watch a
I
Jew
just-
condemn,
Listen,
or try to, you
Professor
know.
Intifada,
Morris.
some
Professor
4,000
Morris.
Palestinians
Professor
were killed.
Morris.
Most of them
You're-
armed people, and the Israelis,
that's a
1,000
complete-
Israelis were killed.
No,
Almost all of them.
No,
Ooh, I killed
Professor
3 people.
Morris, fantasy,
The bugs
but I'm not
did.
gonna
The
argue
bugs
here.
did.
Here's a simple challenge. You said not to look at the camera. Scares the people. I'll make the open challenge.
You are going to scare them.
No, Professor Morris.
Open challenge.
Words are in print. I wrote 50 pages analyzing all of your work. I quote, some will say cherry pick, but I think accurately quote you. Here's a simple challenge. Answer me in print. Answer what I wrote and show where I'm
I'm gonna run
making
Bone
things
Snapper
up.
for a little bit.
Answer me
I'm
in
not
print.
familiar. I'm sorry. but
Okay.
I'm not familiar
no,
with.
that's no problem. You're a busy man. You're an important
Bone
historian.
Snapper, trench
You don't
paramedic.
have to know everything that's in print, especially by modest publishers. But now you know. And so here's the public challenge.
It's an ugly fucking
You
armor.
answer and show where I cherry picked, where I misrepresented.
We are
Send me the article.
losing to the.
And then
It's
we
all
can have
exterminate
a civil,
and
scholarly discussion.
civilian.
I'm not
And
sure we will agree, even if
We don't have to
Yeah, yeah.
agree.
Oh, I understand.
It's
Okay.
for the reader to decide, looking at both sides,
Okay.
where does truth stand.
No,
You
man,
said
and if
the-
I may ask,
Yeah.
it's good to discuss ideas that are in the air now as opposed to citing literature that was written in the past as much as possible because listeners were not familiar with the literature. So, like, whatever was written, just express it, condense the key idea, and then we can debate the ideas.
No,
discuss the
there are
ideas.
two aspects. There's a public debate. There's also written words.
Yes, I'm just telling you that you, as an academic historian, put a lot of value in the written word, and I think it is valuable. But in this
He's
context,
incidentally not the only historian who puts value to words.
Yes.
I also do, actually.
Yes.
Yeah,
But
so we
in
don't
More
give
than
a-
just 1 or 2 sentences at a time. yeah.
but this in this context, just for the educational
Well,
purpose
the
of teaching people.
educational purpose is, why would people commit what I have to acknowledge because I am faithful to the facts? massive atrocities on October 7th. Why did that happen? And I think that's the problem.
I feel like the Tesla Tower
is erased.
might.
And we
Oh, we have a
suddenly
free
went from
jetpack.
1948 to October 7th, 2023.
Let's
And there's
go.
a problem there.
Fuck the guard,
So
dog.
first of all, you have complete freedom to backtrack, and we'll go there with you. Obviously, we can't cover every single year, every single event, but there's probably critical moments in time.
Can I respond to something relating to the Lebanon War? I looked at the book that he got this from and what the quote was from. It sounds cold to say it, but war is tragic and civilians die. There is no war that this has not happened in the history of all of humankind. The statement that Israel might take care not to target civilians is not incompatible with a diary entry from someone who said they saw civilians getting killed. I think that sometimes we do a lot of weird games when we talk about international humanitarian law or laws that govern conflict, where we say things like civilians dying is a war crime, or civilian homes or hospitals getting destroyed is necessarily a war crime, or is necessarily somebody intentionally targeting civilians without making distinctions between military targets or civilians.
Hey, where you going, man?
I think that when we analyze different attacks, or when we talk about the conduct of the military, I think it's important to understand, prospectively, from the unit of analysis of the actual military committing the acts, what's happening and what are the decisions being made, rather than just saying retrospectively, oh, well, a lot of civilians died, not very many, military people died, comparatively speaking, so it must have been war crimes, especially when you've got another side, I'll fast forward to Hamas, that intentionally attempts to induce those same civilian numbers, because Hamas is guilty of any war crime that you would potentially accuse, and this is according to Amnesty International, people that Norm loves to cite. Hamas is guilty of all of these same war crimes, of them failing to take care of the civilian population, of them essentially utilizing human shields to try to fire rockets and freezing attacks. Essentially, yes. I'm just saying that essentially, yes, in terms of how international law defines it, not how Amnesty International defines it. Amnesty International describes times of human shielding, but they don't actually apply the correct international legal standard. I know, absolutely.
Reload, you son of a bitch.
I absolutely do. I absolutely
I
do.
think,
But I'm just saying.
That shot straight through.
Believe it or not, Norm, the entire Geneva Convention is all on Wikipedia. It's a wonderful website. But I'm just saying that on the Hamas side, if there's an attempt to induce this type of military activity, attempt to induce civilian harm, that is not just enough to say, like, well, here's a diary entry where a guy talks about how tragic.
Why is the jump pack unavailable?
The problem with your statement is that if you go back and listen to it, the
Free
first
jump
part
pack
of it
unavailable
is
though.
War is hell. Civilians die. It's a fact of life, and you state that in a very factual manner. Then when you start talking about Hamas, all of a sudden you've discovered morality, and you've discovered condemnation, and you've discovered intent, and you are unfortunately far from alone in this. I'll give you. You know who for me is a perfect example?
Well, wait, hold on. Just a minute. We don't need examples.
No,
the false equivalency of the two sides is astounding. When Hamas kills civilians in a surprise attack on October 7th, this isn't because they are attempting to target military targets and they happen to stumble into a giant festival of people that.
Well, they did happen to stumble into it.
They did, but they
killed 300
yeah, but
people.
they did. But when they stumbled into it, it wasn't an issue of trying to figure out a military target or not. They weren't failing a distinction. There wasn't a proportionality assessment done. It was just to kill civilians. Even the Amnesty International in 2008 and in 2014 and even today will continue to say that it's like these types of attacks.
Find anyone who will deny that Hamas has targeted civilians.
Sure.
You gave the example
But there's a difference because
of suicide bombings during the Second Intifada. I mean, facts are facts.
Sure. But I'm just saying that the Hamas targeting against civilians is different than the incidental loss of life that occurs when Israel does.
How, genocide is the intentional mass murder.
Genocide is an entirely separate claim.
Yeah, but the idea that Israel is not in the business of intentionally targeting civilians, I know that's what we're supposed to believe. But the historical record stands very
it doesn't.
clearly.
I don't believe it does.
You've written about it yourself.
When you say historical, do you mean like in the 40s to the 60s, or do you mean like
I
over
would
the
say
past, like Gaza?
from the 30s of the last century to the 20s of this century? I just like to make the way you characterized it. I think the best example of that I've come across during this specific conflict is John Kirby, the White House spokesman. I've named him Tears Tosterone for a very good reason. When he's talking about Palestinian civilian death, war is hell,
There's nothing to
it's a
pick up,
fact
we'll be
of life,
fine.
get used to it. When he was confronted with Israeli
My Tesla
civilians,
tower destroyed.
he literally broke down
But he
in tears.
understood that one is deliberate and one isn't. He understood that.
No, that's what he tried to make us
No,
understand.
no, he was speaking facts. The Hamas guys who attacked the kibbutzim, apart from the attacks on the military sites, when they attacked the kibbutzim, were out to kill civilians, and they killed family after family, house after house. The Israeli attacks on Hamas installations
better.
and
You
fighters.
know
I don't
better.
know better. No, you don't know Israeli pilots. That's the problem.
Thank God.
You don't know
I
Israeli
know, thank
pilots.
God.
They believe that they are killing Hamasniks. They're given certain
sure they believe it.
objectives, and
I'm
that's
sure
what
they
they
believe
attack.
it.
And if the Hamas
sure
is
they
hiding
believe it.
behind
I'm sure they
civilians,
believe
civilians
every
die.
time they
It's as
target,
simple as
every
that.
time they target a kid, I'm sure they believe it's Hamas. When they killed the 4 kids on the
They believe
yeah,
they
I
were
know they believed it.
Hamasniks.
Even though they were
You know that,
diminutive
but they-
size.
you know
even though they were
that, from
diminutive
that angle, you don't see the size.
Yeah, no, they saw
You
it.
don't see the
Let's
size.
see the size.
Oh, I
Here.
hear you in 2020. You've lied about this particular instance in the
Oh,
past.
Mr.
Those kids weren't just on the beaches, as often stated in articles. Those kids were literally coming out of a previously identified Hamas compound that they had operated from. They literally
Mr.
did. You can
Borelli,
Google it. You can
Mr.
Google it.
Borelli, with all
Mr.
due
Finkelstein.
respect, you're such a fantastic moron. It's terrifying. That wharf was filled with journalists. There were tens.
9
scores
seconds,
of
and we get another one.
That was an old fisherman's shack. What are you talking about? It's so painful.
Hamas naval-
It's so painful to listen to this idiocy.
And to be clear, on the other side, you're implying that the strike
How the
was
fuck did
okay
they get
on
over
the
here?
Israeli side, where they said we're just going to kill 4
Hey,
Palestinian
hey,
children today for no
hey,
reason.
Do you believe that?
Do you believe that? Do you
okay,
believe that?
let's-
Right, right.
okay,
Actually said
do
right.
you
There was
believe
a
that?
hotel of
Okay,
journalists. Do you
here-
think that they
here
were
we
going
go.
to kill
Here
4
we go.
children?
Here we go.
We'll never answer that.
I will answer the question.
Pilots were out to
I will
kill
even
4
answer
children.
And it was approved
morons'
because that was a strike. That was a drone strike.
Here.
So it was approved all the
You
way up
said
the chain that we're going to kill children today. We're going to kill Palestinian
You want me
children
to
today.
answer, or do you want your motor mouth to go? Okay, answer. In 2018,
The way it pushes them back
there was
is
the Great March of
amazing.
Return in Gaza. By all
It doesn't do a great job
recognized
killing them,
human
though.
rights organizations and journalists who were there, it was overwhelmingly non-violent. It was
Organized by the Hamas.
what whoever organized it.
Organized by
it was-
Satan. Let's start
Satan,
with
No,
yeah.
by Hamas.
Okay,
No, by-
Satan.
yeah.
I agree. Let's go for the big one, the big Megillah. It's Satan. Okay, overwhelmingly organized, overwhelmingly non-violent. Resembled at the beginning the first
Bombs here and
the
there.
first Intifada.
They threw
Represent the
bombs here and
first.
there,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay, not bombs. But
They
let's-
tried to make
okay.
holes in the fence,
Okay,
obviously.
Let's continue.
Yeah.
So,
But I'm not sure Israel behaved morally in that
okay,
respect.
okay.
No, no,
How is he not
Okay,
dead?
I'm willing to grant you.
Please,
I'm willing to grant you.
allow me to.
You don't have to pursue
Allow
it.
me.
I'm willing to grant
Allow me.
you.
Allow me
No,
to finish.
I don't know anything about this. I'd like to.
Okay, so as you know, along the Gaza perimeter, there was Israel's best trained snipers. Correct?
I don't know best trained. They were
But-
snipers.
Fine.
Snipers.
I don't know, best train, there was snipers.
Hey, laugh. It's hilarious. The story.
Oiga vey.
You're lying about
It's
the Great
so
March of Return
funny.
had aspects
Okay.
of violence to it.
Okay.
According even the UN says it
Okay,
themselves.
Okay.
But you only select what the UN says that you like.
See, the problem, Mr. Morelli, is you don't know the English language. You don't
I can read
yeah,
from the
did you
UN
hear-
website
did
itself.
I
In regards
say-
to the Great March of Return,
Please
they said,
stop with your
while the
idiotic-
vast majority of
with your
protesters
idiotic-
acted in a peaceful manner,
No, listen to
during
what he
most
said.
protests,
Did-
dozens have
did you
approached the
just
fence,
agree with
Yup,
me?
that was my
burning
BZ.
Oh,
tires,
did I
throwing
say
stones and
overwhelmingly
Molotov cocktails
nonviolent?
towards Israeli forces,
Okay.
applying incendiary
Okay.
kites and balloons
Okay.
into Israeli territory. The latter resulted
Yeah,
in
but-
extensive
but
damage
you
to
don't-
agricultural land and
okay.
nature reserves inside
Okay.
Israel and risked the lives
Yeah,
of Israeli
because
civilians.
Mr.
Some instances
Mr.
of shooting and
Borelli-
throwing them explosives
Yeah,
also
talk
never-
fast,
I'm
so
just
people
trying to-
think that you're coherent.
I'm just reading from the UN.
Yeah,
He
but
does
I
talk
like
fast.
that
You
time.
got
Probably
the
they
month-
agree with you,
You
though.
got the month wrong. You got the month wrong. We're talking about the beginning in March 30th, 2018.
You just described that march as mostly peaceful.
Okay, allow me to finish. So there were the snipers, okay? Now you find it so far-fetched. Israelis purposely, deliberately
Destroyed my
targeting
tower.
civilians? That's such a far-fetched idea. An overwhelmingly non-violent march. What did the international...
Why do I keep having to put it in first
Whatever you wanna
person?
call it.
For months.
Whatever you want to call
Months.
it. Yeah. What did the UN investigation find?
Well, he just read it.
It found. I read the report. I don't read things off of those machines. I read the report. What did it find?
What?
Brace yourself. You thought it was so funny,
Yeah.
the idea of IDF
Oh,
targeting civilians.
I'm so sorry.
Found. Go look this up on your machine.
I already know what you're gonna say. You're gonna say you found that only one or two of them.
I wasn't supposed to go anyway, remember?
Targeted journalists, targeted medics, and here's the funniest one of all. It's so hilarious.
You didn't want me to
They
go.
targeted disabled people who were
I was just trying to do you
300
surprise.
meters away from the fence and just standing by trees.
This is true.
If it's true,
By the way, just quick pause. I think everything was fascinating to listen to except the mention of hilarious. Nobody finds any of this hilarious. And if any of us are laughing, it's not at the suffering of civilians or suffering of anyone. It's at the obvious joyful camaraderie in it. So I'm enjoying it, and also the joy of learning. So thank you.
Can we talk about the targeting civilian thing a little bit? I think there's like an important underlying, not necessarily that, I think it's important to understand, I think it's important to understand there's like 3 different things here that we need to think about. So one is a policy of killing civilians. So I would ask the other side, I'm gonna ask all 3 because I know there won't be a short answer. Do you think there is a policy top down from the IDF to target civilians? That's one thing. A second thing is
said yes.
When I that's fine.
Muy
Okay,
bien.
but then the second thing is, or there's 2 distinctions I want to draw between. I think Benny would say this. I would say this. I'm sure undoubtedly there have been cases
God, he's annoying to
where
listen to.
IDF soldiers, for no good reason, have targeted and killed Palestinians that they should not have done. That would be prosecuted
Just like
as war
they
crimes,
did on
as
the
defined by
7th.
the Rome Statute and the
some
ICC.
have been prosecuted.
Yeah, and I'm
According to
absolutely
you
sure.
in
Hold
your
on,
book,
wait, wait,
practically
yep.
none.
I'm sure.
According to you in your book,
I'm
practically
sure
none.
that we would all agree for soldiers that happens. But I think that it's important. I think that it's important that when we talk about military strikes, or we talk about things especially involving bombings or drone attacks, these are things that are signed off by multiple different layers of command, by multiple people involved in an operation, including intelligence gathering, including weaponeering, and there also have typically lawyers involved. When you make the claim that an IDF soldier shot a Palestinian, those 3 people, the 3 hostages that came up with white flags, and something horrible happened, I think that's a fair statement to make, and I think a lot of criticism is deserved. But when you make the statement that 4 children were killed by a
I'm doing my part for Istanu. If we don't take it, it's y'all's
the claim
fault.
that you're making, the claim that you're making is that multiple levels of the IDF signed off on just
I
killing.
have no idea what
That's great. If you don't
motivated.
understand the process, then let me educate
you
you. I
don't
can tell you. I
understand
do
the
understand the
process.
process. I'm telling you. I'm
You're
trying to explain
really
you right
doing
now.
the IDF.
Yes. It's
You're
basic
studying
military. You
the
can ask
IDF.
anybody that's
Aside
talked
from
about.
Wikipedia,
Can
you
yes,
tell
you
me
can
what
talk
your
to
knowledge
people.
of
You
the
can talk to
IDF is?
people who
Apart from
work in the
Wikipedia,
military.
What's your knowledge of the
You know what?
IDF?
The audience can look this up. Do you think that bombing and strikes are decided by one person in the field? Do you think one person
I
is in control of
respond
an
to
What he's
airplane or a
trying to
drone
tell you
strike?
is a pilot doesn't do it on
Yes,
his own.
strike
Can I
cells have
respond?
entire
Whole
apparatuses
fire.
that are designed to figure out how to strike and who to strike. So when you say that 4 children
Maybe I'll
are
get my
targeted, you're
jetpack,
saying
so
that
maybe I
whole
won't.
apparatus is
You
trying
make
to
my
murder
argument better than
4
me.
Palestinian
You
children.
make my argument
which is
better
a
than me.
ridiculous argument.
Because, really, that it's impossible at the command level. It's impossible at the
say
command level. But you said that they couldn't have done it at the bottom if it weren't also
You
at
just
the
need
top.
to, you don't understand the
So-
strength of
I
the
don't
claim that you're
understand.
making. You're
With
saying
all
that
due
from a
respect,
top-down level, that
with all
lawyers,
due-
multiple
with all due
commanders,
respect,
and all of these
Mr.
people
Burnell,
signed
do
off
not tell me
on
what I don't
killing
understand.
4 Palestinians.
It's true.
Children.
It's true. I don't spend my nights on Wikipedia. I read books. I admit that as a single.
Waste of time.
Yeah,
Wasting time.
I know books are a waste of time. With all due regard,
Well,
there.
for you they are. The only thing you take from them are 2 or 3 quotes that you use.
I
Yeah.
completely respect the fact, and I'll say it on the air, as much as I find totally disgusting what's come of your politics, a lot of the books are excellent. And I'll even tell you, because I'm not afraid of saying it, whenever I have to check on a basic fact, the equivalent of going to the Britannica, I go to your books. I know you got a lot of the facts right.
Benny Moore's
I
books
would
for the
never
listeners.
say books are a waste of time, and it's regrettable to you that you got strapped with a partner who thinks that all the wisdom,
He didn't say they're a waste of time.
I'd like to respond to what you were saying. I think the question that we're trying to answer,
I think you don't understand Israel. You know?
Why is jump pack
let me
unavailable,
finish.
bro? I
I
didn't
think
bring
we're
a
all-
fucking
I think we're all agreed that Palestinians have deliberately targeted civilians. Whether we're talking about Hamas and Islamic Jihad today, or previously.
I prefer the word murdered and raped rather than targeted. Targeted is too soft
I'll use
for what the
targeted.
Hamas did.
I'm okay with
I'm not talking about.
I'm talking about this now.
Yeah, but I'm trying to answer his question.
Yeah.
Historically, there is substantial.
Why give it to
evidence
us if it's
that
unavailable?
Palestinians have targeted civilians. Whether it's been incidental or systematic is a different discussion. I don't want to get into that now. For some reason, there seems to be a huge debate about
About
whether
70 meters. I can
any
throw
Israeli
like
has
50,
ever
I
sunk
think.
so low as to target a civilian. I don't
No,
know.
we've agreed. Both
We
said
just
that.
agreed
We've
that
just
we
said
concede
that
that
this
that
has
was
happened
not
here.
Okay, and I think
We've agreed on that.
Okay, I think
What we're saying is it's not policy, which is what you guys are
Okay.
implying, that they kill civilians deliberately.
if I understand you correctly, you're basically making
Good throw.
the claim that
Good throw.
none of these attacks could have happened without going through an entire chain of
For
command.
strike cells that are involved in like drone attacks
Yes.
or plane attacks
Yes.
or yes.
My understanding of the Israeli military, and you could perhaps, you've served in it, you would know better, it's actually a fairly chaotic organization.
No, that's not true. Especially not the Air Force. Extremely organized. The Air Force works in a very organized fashion. As he says, with lawyers, a chain of command, and ultimately the pilot drops the bomb where he's supposed
Was
to
it
drop it.
in Protective Edge? Was that 200 strikes in like 60 seconds? I think at the opening of Protective Edge, like the coordination between.
You're talking about
military and everything.
2008.
I think
Yeah.
Protective Edge was 2014. But I'm just saying that the coordination in the military is pretty
Well,
tight.
my understanding of the Israeli military
very organized.
especially
Very
is
organized.
that it's quite chaotic, and there's also a lot of testimonies from Israel. But be that as it may,
My
okay,
God.
I'm prepared to accept both of your contentions that it's a highly organized and
Especially the Air
disciplined force. Air Force, under any scenario, is going to be more organized than the other branches. And you're saying such a strike would have been inconceivable.
I'm not necessarily.
Or-
changing it
Jesus
to- I'm just saying that,
Christ.
like, that was
Okay, you're basically
murderous intent.
yes. You're
I don't think good evidence is represented to say that that's.
Your basic claim is that we it would be fair to assume that such a strike could have only been carried out with multiple levels of authorization and signing off. Okay, let's accept that for the sake of argument. We have now seen incident after incident after incident after incident where entire families are vaporized in single strikes.
Who is
We've
in the
seen-
families? Who lives in the house?
Family
inside?
members.
No,
Family
or next to
members.
the house.
Oh.
Which these families are
We
killed.
have seen incident after.
Do you know that Hamasniks weren't in that house? Do you know that their
know they
ammunition
were?
dumps weren't
Why
in
do I
those
have
houses?
to prove a negative?
You're saying that they deliberately targeted
Well,
families.
Professor Mark, how
If
do you-
Israel wanted to kill civilians in Gaza, they could have killed 500,000 by now with the number of
And
strikes they've
therefore-
done.
and therefore-
the fact that they've only
Actually,
killed a certain
only-
small number.
only-
30,000
in
is a small number.
Small number in
You
proportion.
consider 30,000
small
a small
number in
number.
proportion
Yeah.
over 4 months
12,000
probably
children
is an
is
indication
only.
that
12,000
it's
children is
targeted and that there are
only.
Hamas targets in these places.
So I've given
12,000 children is only. And if that's the case, why is
I
it?
use the-
Yeah, you said only. Only. So, Professor Morris, here's a question for you. If we take every combat zone in the world for the past 3 years, every combat zone in the world.
In Vietnam, the Americans killed
I said,
a million
I'm not
people.
talking about
Well, they could have
Vietnam.
killed
I wasn't-
40 million.
I wasn't. Yeah, I was again in the anti-war movement. So don't
Americans
strap me.
killed a million people in Vietnam.
Fine. And 30 million Russians were killed. So during World War II, so everything else is irrelevant. Okay.
Not
Here's the
everything
question.
relevant. Stick to
Professor Morris,
proportionality.
here's a question. It's very perplexing. If you take every combat zone in the world for the past 3 years and you multiply the number of children killed by 4, every combat zone in the world, you get Gaza. Okay? So when you
What is
say
that supposed to prove?
Okay, I'm gonna
Wait,
tell you.
firstly,
Just
you're lying.
shut up.
You're
That they
relying
kill
on
more
Hamas
kids than anyone
numbers.
else.
No, I'm not
Hamas
relying.
numbers are
I'm
not
relying on the
necessarily-
numbers that
You know
everybody
that.
else. I'm relying on the
Sure,
numbers.
even
that
if we take the
everybody
numbers,
else
though,
did.
what does that
Those
prove?
are Hamas numbers.
Okay.
Which may not
Fine,
be true.
fine.
They could invent anything because
I
you know
think
that they are a mendacious
I think we
organization.
all
Fucking
mendacious.
spewers,
Believe me.
man.
You like words.
Mendacious as in the
mendacious
Israeli
organization.
Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Okay, so here's the thing. You say they could have killed 500,000. but they only killed only. That's your word.
I'm
They
not-
only killed
you
30,000.
believe that they
So,
deliberately
here-
target
here-
civilians. They
Okay.
would have killed many
No, you
more.
see,
The fact is that they don't
Professor
deliberately
Morris-
target civilians.
Professor Morris, for a
And you don't understand
for a
Israeli
historian,
society.
I
You
don't want to
understand how it
understand
works.
Israeli society.
You don't
You want to know the
understand how
truth.
it
I
works.
don't want to. I don't want to get inside their heads.
That's the problem.
90% of
A good historian tries to get into the heads of
There's a limit.
the various
There's a limit.
protagonists.
There's a limit. When
That's what a good historian does.
90% of Israelis think that Israel's using
Shit,
enough
they're silent,
force,
bro.
too little force in Gaza, I don't want to get inside that head. 40% think that Israel's using insufficient force in Gaza. I don't want to get inside that head. I don't want to get inside the head of people who think
Oh
they're
no,
using
I'm
insufficient
fucking
force
dead.
Historians
against
must
a
understand.
population, half of which is children. I don't want to get inside that head. But here's the point, because your partner wants to know the point. You don't understand political constraints. One of your ministers said, let's drop an atomic bomb on
You think
Gaza.
he really meant that?
Well,
said it three
you-
No.
Hey,
It was said in a sort of a
Professor
very
Morris.
questionable way. He didn't say they should drop an
Professor
atomic
Morris.
bomb.
The day
I'm not
after
supporting
the
him. He's an
Professor
idiot.
Morris,
This
He said,
minister,
"I want
other-
to hate
this
none
minister
other-
is
none
a
other- yeah,
messianic
none other
idiot.
than
But
Israel's-
he didn't say
none-
drop an atomic
none
bomb.
other
No.
than Israel's chief historian, the famed, justifiably famed Benny Morris, thinks we should be dropping nuclear weapons on Iran.
Iran has for years, its leaders for years have said we should destroy Israel. You agree with that? They've said we should destroy Israel. Israel must be destroyed. Is that correct? This is what the Iranian leaders have been saying since
I
Khomeini.
would say Iranian leaders have sent mixed messages.
Okay, but some of them have said
That's pretty funny, actually.
Khamenei
If you don't
and
know the
Khomeini.
evidence, if you don't
Wait,
know the
wait, wait.
evidence,
The
why are
selective
you laughing?
skepticism is very funny.
It's funny because
Iran that supports
it's-
Hezbollah
okay,
and the Houthis
okay.
and Hamas,
Oh,
they
yeah.
want Israel destroyed.
Brace yourself.
Wait.
To the extent that the Houthis
It's
are
complicated.
to the extent that the Houthis are trying to stop the genocide in Gaza,
One, there is
No,
no
there's
genocide.
no
They have
genocide.
the right to
I
attack
support-
civilian ships.
I support
know you
the
selectively
Houthis.
support
There's no
international law when
I
it agrees
support-
with you,
okay.
and then when it doesn't, you decide
Okay.
to throw international law
There's
to
no
the wind.
genocide in Gaza.
If
There's
you
no
like,
genocide.
Yeah, hold on a
let me
second.
read-
Norm.
Let me read what you said.
Norm, stop, please. Norm, just for me, please. Just give me a second. You said that there's no genocide going on in Gaza.
Yes.
Let me ask that clear question.
Yes.
The same question I asked on Hamas attack. Is there, from a legal, philosophical, moral perspective, is there genocide going on in Gaza today?
Is there a genocide going on in Gaza? Well, in several years, we will have a definitive response
But at the
to
moment-
that question. What has happened thus far is that on the 29th of December, the Republic of South Africa instituted proceedings against Israel pursuant to the 1948 Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. South
So
Africa
somebody believes there
basically
is.
accused Israel of perpetrating genocide in the Gaza Strip. On the 26th of January, the court issued its initial ruling. The court, at this stage, is not making a determination on whether Israel has or has not committed genocide. So just as it has not found Israel guilty, it certainly also hasn't found Israel innocent.
Beautiful.
What the court had to do at this stage.
If the cooldown was
was
shorter,
take
that
one
would
of
be
two decisions.
super good stratagem.
Either South Africa's case was the equivalent of a frivolous lawsuit.
Well, somebody
and
down there is
dismissal
throwing a
in the
tantrum.
proceedings, or it had to determine that South Africa presented a plausible case that Israel was violating its obligations under the Genocide Convention, and that it would, on that basis, hold a full hearing. Now, a lot of people have looked at the court's ruling of the 26th
Fuck
of
it, I got a
January
flamethrower.
and focused on the fact that the court did not order a ceasefire. I actually wasn't expecting it to order a ceasefire, and I wasn't surprised that it didn't, because in the other cases that the court has considered, most prominently Bosnia and Myanmar, it also didn't order a ceasefire. And South Africa, in requesting a ceasefire, also didn't ask the court to render an opinion on the legitimacy or lack thereof of Israel's military operation. From my perspective, the key issue on the 26th of January was whether the court would simply dismiss the case or decide to proceed with it.
And it decided to proceed.
And it decided to proceed. And I think that's enormously.
I thought that was
I think that's
beautifully
enormous.
But you said they
significant.
committed genocide. You already said they committed genocide.
I also
Israel
like-
is committing genocide.
But if
You
I
used
could
that
just-
word.
Allow me.
Use that word.
That's correct.
Now,
I don't run away.
So
from
Norman,
my
you
word.
did say Israel
Norm,
is committing
I would
genocide.
Can you
say-
let Moeen
Yeah.
finish?
well, the end of the story is you specifically asked whether I think Israel is committing genocide. I explained formally there is no finding, and as you said, we won't know for a number of years. And I think there's legitimate questions to be raised. I mean, in the Bosnia case, which I think all four of us would agree was clearly a case of genocide, the court determined.
By the service.
Yes. In the Bosnia case, the court determined that of all the evidence placed before them, only Srebrenica qualified as genocide, and all the other atrocities committed did not qualify as genocide. You know, international law is a developing organism. I don't know how the court is going to respond in this case, so I wouldn't take it as a foregone conclusion how the court is going to respond.
But
my,
Norman has determined already.
I have too, because you're asking my personal
Opinion is also.
So as a matter of law, I want to state very clearly, it has not been determined and won't be determined for several years. Based on my observations and the evidence before me, I would say it's indisputable that Israel is engaged in a genocidal assault against the Palestinian people in the Gaza
Which is
Strip.
the PLO line.
Yeah, with the program, the PLO is long past.
Okay, the
what
Palestinian
defines-
Authority.
As you were saying, genocide is not a body count. Genocide consists of two elements: the destruction of a people in whole or in part. So, in other words, you can commit genocide by killing 30,000 people. It doesn't have. Well, 5 probably is below
There
the
is a
threshold.
problem. Number.
Yes, but I think 30,000 crosses the threshold, and not reaching 500,000 is probably irrelevant. And the second element is there has to be an intent. In other words,
And you believe there's an intent?
yes, I think if there is any other plausible reason for why all these people are being murdered, it's not genocide. And as far as intent is
What about
concerned-
hiding behind a human shield? You don't think that's the reason for them being killed?
Well, let's get the intent part out of the way first. South Africa's.
Forget South Africa. They're not the party.
Well, I'd like to finish.
They
I'd
make
like-
pro-Hamas
application.
government. That's got nothing to do with it.
I think they're pro-Satan as well last time.
No,
I
they're
checked.
pro-Hamas.
You know, for some reason, you don't have a problem with people being pro-Israeli at the time of this. But if they support Palestinians' right to life or self-determination, they get demonized and
Not because of
delegitimized
that,
as
because They supported
pro-Hamas.
an organization which murdered 1,200 people deliberately. That's my
But
problem.
supporting a state that has murdered 30,000.
But they haven't,
They've-
because these are 30,000
Okay.
are basically human
Well, just to
shields
get back-
used by the Hamas,
Okay.
And
in
you
which the
just-
Hamas
and
wanted,
please, Norm,
let me-
killed.
Okay, if
They
I
wanted
could-
them killed.
all right, if I
The
could-
Hamas wanted these people
Sure.
killed.
If I could just get.
You don't think they wanted them killed? They
No,
didn't
I don't.
provide them with shelters. They build tunnels for their fighters,
Okay,
but
if I
not
could get
one
back to my
shelter
point.
for their own civilians.
You asked me about
Of
intent.
course they want them killed.
Okay, you asked me about intent, and the reason that I bought in the South African application is because it is actually exceptionally detailed on intent by quoting
All
numerous.
sorts of idiotic ministers in Israel.
Well, yeah, including the prime minister, the defense
the Prime
minister,
didn't say
the
kill,
chief of
Didn't
staff.
say genocide. the chief
No, he
of
said
staff.
According
Amalek.
to
He
Asa
said
Kasher,
Amalek.
Use the word
According
Amalek
to Asa
because the
Kasher-
Hamas are a really
According
evil
to Asa
organization.
Kasher,
if I may.
according to Asa Kasher, the philosopher of
Asa
IDF,
Kasher,
yeah, he said that Netanyahu was avowing genocide. Now
So-
he's an idiot.
So
I
the
didn't say
point.
he's an idiot, but he's
Yeah.
past it.
So the reason I raised the South African application is twofold:
Yeah.
Hamas or no Hamas. It's exceptionally detailed
Okay.
on the question of intent. And secondly, when the International Court of Justice issues a ruling, individual justices can give their own opinion.
Yeah, yeah.
And I found the German one to be the most interesting on this specific question, because he was basically saying that he didn't
Climate.
think South Africa presented a persuasive case. But he
We're coming
said
from this way.
their section on intent was so overpowering that he felt he was left with no choice but to vote with the majority. So I think that answers the intent part of your question.
So for the ICJ case that South Africa's brought, I think there's a couple things that need to be mentioned. One is, and I saw you two talk at length about this, the plausibility standard is incredibly low. The only thing we're looking for is a basic presentation of facts that make it conceivable, possible, that
Plausible.
plausible, which legally this is obviously below criminal conviction, below,
Yes, of course.
below.
Think of it as an
it's-
indictment.
Sure, possibly. Maybe even a lower level than even an indictment. So plausibility is an incredibly low standard, number one. Number two, if you actually go through and you read the complaint that South Africa filed, I would say that if you go through the quotes and you even follow through to the source of the quotes, the misrepresentation that South Africa does in their case about all of these horrendous quotes, in my opinion, borders on criminal.
Well, 16 ICJ judges disagree.
That's fine if 16 ICJ judges disagree,
They must
but
be
I'm going to
awful
give,
incompetent.
they could be,
They
but
must be even the American judge, she must have been awful incompetent if she was unable to see the misrepresentations that Mr. Bonnell, based on his Wikipedia entry, was able to find.
so this is based on the official ICJ report that was
Yeah,
released. I'm not
I
sure if you
read
read
it.
the entire
I
thing or not.
read
Okay, that's
every
great.
aspect.
Did you go through and actually identify any of the sources for the underlying quotes?
Actually, brace yourself for this, and Marine could confirm it. Yaniv Kogan, an Israeli, and Jamie Stern Reiner, half Israeli, they checked every single quote in the Hebrew original, and Yaniv Kogan, love the guy. He has terrifying powers of concentration.
Fucking hate
He
spitters.
checked every single quote. Is that correct, Marine? And Jamie checked every single quote in the English, in the context. And where there were any contextual questions, they told us.
I think they found one.
Yeah, I think they found one. So I do not believe that those 15 judges is 15 to 2. You're 15 on the court plus 2, so 17, so it's 15 to 2. I don't
Fucking
think
hate
those
spewers.
15 judges were incompetent, and I certainly don't believe the president of the court, an American, would allow herself to be duped.
Okay,
Because you might recall, Mr. Morrell. Mr. Morrell.
I think I want to read one.
Let him read.
Sure. So this was taken from the South African complaint. There's tons of these, but so here's one. In the complaint for the ICJ, they said that on the 12th of October 2023, President Isaac Herzog made clear that Israel was not distinguishing between militants and civilians in Gaza, stating in a press conference to foreign media in relation to Palestinians in Gaza, over 1 million of whom are children, quote, "It's an entire nation out there that is responsible. It is not true, this rhetoric about civilians not aware, not involved.
I saw that.
It's absolutely not true, and we will fight until we break their backbone," end quote. If you actually go to the news article that they even link it in their complaint, the full context for the quote was, quote, "It is an entire nation out there that is responsible. It's not true, this rhetoric about civilians not being aware, not involved. It's absolutely not true. They could have risen up. They could have fought against that evil regime, which took over Gaza in a coup d'etat. But we are at war. We are defending our homes. We are protecting our homes. That's the truth. And when a nation protects its home, it fights, and we will fight until we break their backbone." He acknowledged that many Gazans had nothing to do with Hamas, but was adamant that others did. Quote, "I agree there are many innocent Palestinians who don't agree with this, but if you have a missile in your goddamn kitchen and you want to shoot it at me, am I allowed to defend myself? We have to defend ourselves. We have the right to do so. This is not the same as saying there's no distinction between militants and civilians in Gaza. His statement here is actually fully compliant with international law to the letter, because if you are storing military supplies in civilian areas, these things become military targets, and you're allowed to do proportionality assessments afterwards. So if this is supposed to be one of many quotes that they've shown that is supposed to demonstrate genocidal intent, but it is very easily explained by military intent or by a conflict between two parties.
I saw that press conference.
Wait, let me just say something. All of this talk is a bit irrelevant because it may sound to the listeners that the court in The Hague has ruled that Israel is committing genocide.
No, I think
but it hasn't. It hasn't.
no.
It's just going in the next few years to look at the whole subject.
Okay.
There
I
has
think we're
been no,
agreed on that.
no determination at all.
Fine.
And as Stephen says, some of the quotes are not exactly accurate quotes
Okay.
or taken out of
Total
context.
mischaracterization.
Okay. It is correct, as Muin put it, that it'll be several years before the court makes a determination.
And my guess is that it will determine there was no genocide.
We can only
That's my
I
guess.
can't-
Yes, no, I'm just giving you my guess.
I can't predict. I got it all wrong, actually, as Muin will attest. I got it all wrong the first time. I never thought the American judge would vote in favor of plausibility.
So you admit that you were wrong.
Yeah, of course. I think I tell Muin twice a day I was wrong about this and I was wrong about that. I'm not wrong about the facts. I try not to be, but my speculations, they can be wrong. Okay, leaving that aside.
That hurt.
First of all, as Muin pointed out, there's a difference between the legal decision by the ruling and an independent judgment. Now, South
There's
Africa
that
was not filing
fat
a
sack
frivolous
of
case.
shit.
That was 84 pages. It was single.
Even 84
It was
pages can be
single-spaced.
frivolous.
It takes an
Single-
hour.
Okay, so you can't fight nursing skewers with a fucking flamethrower.
Single space, and it had literally hundreds of footnotes.
can still be frivolous.
It's possible.
Of course.
It
But
could
this
be.
one wasn't.
Yeah, I read the report. To tell you the truth, I followed very closely everything that's been happening to October 7th. I was mesmerized. I couldn't believe the comprehensiveness of that particular report. Number two, there are two quite respected judges, there were two quite respected experts of international law sitting on the South African panel, John Dugard.
They're not
and
dead.
Vaughan Lowe.
That's
Vaughan
great.
Lowe, as you might know, he argued the Rule case in 2004 before
Burn,
the
you
International
fat
Court
sacks of
Justice.
shit.
Now, they were not, they were alleging genocide, which in their view means the evidence in their minds, we're not yet at the court, the evidence in their minds compels the conclusion that genocide is being committed. I am willing, because I happen to know Mr. Dugard personally and have corresponded with Vaughan Lowe. I've heard their claim, I've read the report. I would say they make a very strong case. But let's agree plausible. Now, here's a question. If somebody qualifies for an Olympic team, let's say a regional person qualifies for an Olympic team, it doesn't mean they're going to be on the Olympic team. It doesn't mean they're going to win a gold medal, a silver medal, or a bronze
But they
medal.
can swim, that's what you're saying.
No, I would say that's a very high bar
You're saying they can swim.
to even qualify.
Swim well enough to have a realistic prospect of winning a medal.
So, to even make it to plausible.
That is
high
not true.
bar.
to even-
That is not
it's
what
a
plausible
very
means.
high-
It is absolutely not. You're
Mr.
dead
Borelli,
wrong.
Mr. Borelli, please don't teach me about the English language.
So the declaration of Judge
I
Point
said
says that the court
plausibility
is not
is the
asked
same
in the present
concept
phase.
as qualifying.
The court is not asked at this present phase of the proceedings to determine whether South Africa's allegations of genocide are well-founded. They're not
Didn't I just
well-founded.
say
They're not
that?
even well-founded. The
Did
court
I-
isn't. You said that plausible is a
I-
high standard. It is absolutely not. It is a misrepresentation of the strength of the case against Israel, just like the majority
Not-
of the quotes
not
they have in this
every-
case are. And also, you said it was an extremely well-founded case. They spend like 1/4 of all of the quotations, some even pulled from the Goldstone report, that try to actually deal with the intent part. Which is, by the way, I think you guys, I don't know if you use the phrase, the dolus specialis, that the intentional part of genocide.
Sorry, I don't know that term.
I think it's called dolus specialis. It's the most important part of genocide, which is proving there's a highly special intent to commit genocide. It's possible that Israel could.
That's mens rea.
No. The mens rea, yes, I understand the state of mind, but for genocide, it's called dolus specialis. It's a highly special intent. Did you read the case? It is
Mr.
a highly
Pirelli,
special intent.
I'm
to be
going to
convicted
ask you
of
again.
genocide. Yes.
Please stop displaying your imbecility.
Okay, I'm sorry if you think the declaration of the judge is
Don't
imbecile.
put on public display that you're a moron. At least have the self-possession to shut up. Did I read the case?
Putting my display on camera. If you're
Pirelli,
putting yours in
Mr.
books,
Pirelli,
okay?
I read the case around 4 times. I read all of the majority opinion, the declarations. I read Aaron Barak's declaration.
Then why are you lying and saying plausible is a high standard?
Because I said, even reaching the benchmark of plausibility is a very high standard in the world. It's the equivalent of a regional player qualifying for an Olympics. It's still 2 steps removed. You may not be on the team, and you may not get a medal, but to get qualified, which in this context is the equivalent of plausible, you must be doing something pretty horrible. And as it happens, Professor Morris,
there was no genocide. That's what the court will rule. Remember what I just told you. The court will
I don't
rule
expect
there
to
was
be
no
even
genocide.
around when the court reaches its final decision.
Why?
Why? It'll take a long, long time. 2 years. No, I don't think it'll take 2 or 3 years.
Bosnia, which was admittedly a special type of case because they were accusing Serbia of sponsoring the Bosnian Serbs. That took, I think, 17 years from 90.
I assume they'll take 2 or 3 years.
But the point you're making, so this
I'm
is
saying
illegal.
that something horrible must be happening to even achieve.
It's horrible. It's a war.
Yeah,
It's true,
It's
yes.
horrible.
But I
Except
think-
they weren't rendering a ruling on a war. They were rendering a ruling on a genocide.
And I think the
render it.
suggestion.
And they said it was
They just
plausible.
said,
They also said it
we'll
was
talk about
plausible
it.
that Israel is committing a
But
military operation as well.
Yeah, but I think the problem with
I brought the
with
wrong
your
fucking weapons to deal with
characterization is you're saying in
Biafras.
so many words, the South Africans basically only have to show up in court with a coherent
Right.
statement.
Right.
That is correct.
In
They
today's
needed-
atmosphere, that's probably correct.
They needed to do a lot more.
Not
they
much more.
they needed
Not
to
much more.
they needed
The
to
American
persuade.
judge?
Today's atmosphere.
The
forget
American
American.
judge?
They needed
Today's
to
atmosphere,
persuade.
Judges go according to what the majority want to hear.
Yeah, but
That's
they
right.
He was the
needed-
president.
They needed to persuade the court that it was worth investing several years.
12
of their time
minutes.
in
They're probably
hearing
well
this
paid
case.
for it,
To
so
us.
they-
They're well paid whether
they
they
have
take
time
this
for it.
case or not. I mean, you know, they have a full docket whether they accept or reject this case. And I don't think we should.
Remember
I mean, there's
what I just
activist
said, they
judges
don't
on
rule
both
the
sides.
Remember what
I mean, of this
Also, I
debate.
recommend people actually read the case and follow through a lot of the quotes. That they just
Okay.
don't show
Mr.
genocidal
Pirelli,
intent.
I
brace
don't think so
yourself.
either.
The Israeli Minister of
Mr.
Finance on the
Pirelli.
8th of October 2023. This is
You don't need
from
to-
the ICJ. This is from South
You
African
can't
Nation.
find proof that Hitler
I can't read this. Stated. There you go. Okay. At a meeting of the Israeli
sanctioned
cabinet that,
or
quote,
ordered
"We
the
need to deal with a
Holocaust,
blow
that doesn't
hasn't been
mean that
seen
he didn't
in
have
50 years
genocidal
and take down
intent."
Gaza. End quote. But again, if you click through and you read the source, there are
Very
linked
famous
sources.
historians
As
have
per
poured
the
over all the
sources,
documents.
quote, the
There's
powerful
no
finance
proof
minister,
from the bottom to the
Assembly
top
leader,
that he
Bezalel Smotrich,
sanctioned it
demanded at the
and
cabinet meeting late
ordered
Saturday that
it.
the army, quote, hit Hamas brutally and not take the matter of the captives into significant consideration, end quote. Quote, in war as in war, you have to be brutal, end quote. He was quoted as saying, quote, we need to deal a blow that hasn't been seen in 50 years and take down Gaza, end quote. You can't strip the quotation of Hamas, a entity you're at war with, and then pretend that there's genocidal intent. That's not how it
That's not genocide.
Hey,
So when the
Take down
Ukrainians say
Gaza?
we need, when the Ukrainians
Yeah,
say
take
we need to
down
defeat
Gaza.
Russia,
That's
Take
not
down Gaza.
genocidal.
no. When Ukraine says we need to defeat Russia,
Yeah.
is that genocidal? Do they
Here's
mean
one.
killing all Russian citizens?
Professor Morris, here's
It's-
another
it's
one.
not- it's
When
ridiculous.
the defense, ridiculous.
Yes, ridiculous.
The American judge.
He also doesn't determine policy, but
The
that's
American judge.
neither here nor
The
there.
American judge read.
You are holding the American judge to,
Well, she was the president.
Because he'll
So
appeal
what?
to authority when it agrees
Okay.
with him, and we won't deal with the actual
Yeah.
facts of the matter, ever.
Okay. The American judge read several of the quotes.
Look at the American
Okay.
Supreme Court today. They may support Trump.
Okay, look.
Shows you how
Okay,
worthy
Professor
American
Morris,
judges are.
Professor Morris, without going too far afield, if you heard a statement by the defense minister. The defense minister said, we are going to prevent any food, water, fuel, or electricity from entering Gaza.
Do that. Did Israel do that?
Okay, no, I'm wondering.
What he said.
I'm asking you.
Isn't Israeli government
wait,
policy?
but we're talking about statements now, intent. How would you interpret that?
After 1,200 of your citizens are murdered the way they were, I would expect extreme statements by lots of politicians.
But you're.
By lots of politicians.
But you don't accept extreme
But that's not Israeli
Palestinian.
policy.
Wait, but you don't
What he
accept.
said isn't Israeli policy.
But you don't-
They let in
please.
water, they let in gas.
I'm sure
they
But
let
you don't
in
accept.
electricity.
But you don't accept
I'm
extreme
true.
Palestinian statements after they lost their entire country, not just 1,200 people.
That's a good point. No, it's a good point.
And on that, on that brief moment of agreement, let's just take a quick pause. You need a smoke break, you need a water break, you need a bathroom break.
Take down Gaza is not a genocide.
I don't know
Defeat
what it
Russia
means.
is a genocide
What does
statement.
take down
When we
Gaza
went to
mean?
war with Iraq and we wanted to destroy Iraq, that was a
Take down
genocidal
Gaza.
statement. There's a reason why genocide is such an importantly guarded concept, and it's not to condemn every nation that goes to war. Wait, you do know how to pronounce my name. Are you mispronouncing it intentionally?
Yeah, I made you in Italian all the time.
By your solicitude for international law.
You should try learning it sometime. It would help you sort out a lot of this.
That was close, bro. That 4 seconds of invulnerability saved my ass.
The judges, by reading the
I was like out of ammo. I'm gonna just fucking hit all these bugs on the head. Oh my god.
Tiring session.
Ugh, I think I need to go get groceries. Make some food.
There are major things to
I guess I'll
discuss.
see y'all later.
What some court is doing and gonna
Okay.
judge in 2 years' time.
Yes, okay.
They're just talking
What
in
you just
circles
said is
about
why
whether or not it's
whole-
genocide,
One of
that's
the
all.
reasons why I feel so strongly about this particular conflict is because there are really important things to discuss, but they will never be discussed.